Thai PBS World. I'm Nabunag.
And I'm Hatay Tiranan, and this is the first edition of Good Morning with Thai PBS World, but you may already be familiar with us, Kunat and me, if you followed our previous show, Thai PBS World Tonight, which has now been moved to the morning. And we are bringing you all the top stories in Thailand and exclusive interviews and reports right here on Thai PBS every weekday at 7:30 a.m.
And basically, we transformed from Thai PBS World Tonight to Good Morning with Thai PBS World. And speaking of all the top stories, let's talk about another protest that took place yesterday in Bangkok. So there was another political protest and a clash between the protesters and police yesterday, where at least 3 anti-government protest groups held what they call car mob protests, demanding Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha to resign. One group was led by Nathawut Saikia, former core member of the United Front for Democracy Against Dictatorship, or the so-called Red Shirts, and he's also the leader of the Thai Miton group. The second group was led by political activist Sombat Bunnngam Anong, and the third by the Thalufa group. So throughout their rallies yesterday afternoon, many were seen waving flags, holding up signs, and flashing their 3-finger salute to show defiance against the Prime Minister. And in the evening, Nathawut arrived at Dindang intersection and asked the protesters to go home and not to clash with the crowd control police. Despite all this, the clashes started where protesters were seen throwing projectiles with the police, and the police resorted into using tear gas. Also, another police booth there was also set ablaze. Fireworks were also reportedly heard from time to time.
And like yesterday, we've been seeing most of the street protests taking place on weekends as more people could join. But recently, since last week, for example, street protests that resulted in violent clashes happened on weekdays as well.
And this may also signal growing anger against the government, as well as the continual surge of the COVID-19 infections. And at the same time, there's also still a low rate of vaccination. Yesterday, for example, a record high of over 5,000 severe cases were reported.
Right, but we need to note also that it was the hardcore elements like vocational students that use weapons such as slingshots and explosive against the officers, not the general protesters, who dispersed after the leaders called off these gatherings, while police are responding in kind with a known figure look not being hit in the eye and reportedly gotten blind from a tear gas canister back on Friday.
Right. So that is the latest about the anti-government protests. So we might still see them in the coming days as well.
And speaking of the current pandemic that is still showing no sign of abating, it appears that the resort island of Phuket, which is the first to welcome overseas arrivals with a quarantine, has extended its restrictions and closure from domestic visits and for 2 more weeks due to the pandemic. To explain a bit more, the restrictions are that domestic arrivals are banned, whether it's by land, air, or sea. The exceptions are ambulances, rescue vehicles, transports of medicines and medical supplies, transports of consumer goods, agricultural produce, for example, livestock, fuel and gas, banks, cash, parcels, and printed materials, international air departures, officials working to bring the pandemic under control, and those with urgent assignments. But this will not affect Phuket residents and visitors related to the Phuket Sandbox scheme who can still enter the island. The people who are exempted from the restrictions, though, must have been vaccinated with 2 shots of Sinovac or at least 1 shot of AstraZeneca or Pfizer or Moderna or the single shot of Johnson & Johnson for at least 14 days prior to arrival, or those who have recovered from COVID-19 for at least 19 days, or 90 days rather, and most importantly, the visitors must have a negative RT-PCR or antigen test result not older than 72 hours. As for children, those under 6 years old can enter the island when accompanied by a guardian who meets the requirements. Children who are 6 years old and over but not over 17 must have the negative RT-PCR or antigen test result not older than 72 hours. Meanwhile, students who are under 18 who need to enter the island for school must have their student ID and take an RT-PCR test.
And speaking of the COVID-19 situation in Phuket, the resort island actually records the highest rate of vaccination in the entire country, with a relatively low number of infections compared to other provinces. But over the past few weeks, the number of cases on the island has increased. So the total infections on the island are now 1,940, with 14 deaths and 776 remaining in hospitals. But to give you a note, these are yesterday's figures, so we will have to wait for today for the official figures from Phuket.
And actually, Kunat, our team, including Kunat herself, flew down to Phuket last month for the grand opening of this sandbox project, which brought about a lot of excitement among the locals who can finally make some more money after a long dry spell.
Exactly. When I went there, they were really excited about the reopening because they've been seriously affected by the pandemic. More tourists coming in, that means there's more income for them. And with the Phuket Sandbox scheme, it has already generated up to 800 million baht of revenue in July.
Exactly, Kunat.
Yeah, and during COVID-19, many of the volunteers have come out to help out the communities in need. And today we're introducing you to a volunteer group providing food to those who have been cut off by the pandemic. So let's find out more in this report.
Deep in Pradipat 15th Street, the Uttairat community has 190 families with thousands of people who have been affected by the spread of COVID-19. This community is one of many that has been receiving help from a volunteer group, Sendai, that has set up a network in 50 districts of Bangkok to coordinate all necessities, whether it's medicine, food, or hospital beds. Chitakon Withurat, the community leader, told Thai PBS World that Sendai Group helps people that lose their jobs or are in home isolation.
ก็ช่วงนี้กลุ่มขึ้นได้เขาก็เข้ามาบริจาคบ่อยนะครับช่วยเหลือเพื่อประทานความเดือดร้อนให้คนชุมชนผู้ที่ตกงานบ้างผู้ที่กักตัวบ้างอะไรเงี้ยทางเพจเส้นได้เขาก็มาร่วมบริจาคบ่อยก็คือเราตอนนี้เราจะผู้ติดเชื้อเราก็ส่งข้าวส่งน้ำส่งยาอาหารแยกผู้กักตัวก็เหมือนกันครับจะไม่ให้ออกมาเป็นผ้าอะไรอย่างนี้ทางการมาแจกข้าวนะปุ๊บเราก็จะแยกให้ผู้กักตัวกับผู้ที่ผู้ป่วยก็จะส่งครับก็คือเป็นอย่างนี้ครับ
Sutket Pitaksap, Sendai's member who started out as the group's very first transportation volunteer, said that Sendai receives information from the communities on the number of people in home isolation and people infected by COVID-19 so they can provide enough food for breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
ก็ข้อมูลเบื้องต้นนะครับทางเส้นได้รับการประสานงานจากประธานชุมชนอสสครับของชุมชนนะครับเกี่ยวกับเรื่องผู้ติดเชื้อโควิดให้เส้นได้เข้ามาช่วยตรงนี้ครับเส้นได้ก็จะมีข้อมูลตรงนี้ว่าชุมชนนี้มียอดผู้ป่วยเท่าไหร่ยอดผู้กักตัวเท่าไหร่ครับทางเส้นได้ก็เลยจัดหาพวกข้าวสารอาหารแห้งหรือข้าวสดมาช่วยในเรื่องตรงนี้ด้วยครับ
Thai PBS World spoke to Pirapon Ganokwalai, who looks over Sendai's food distribution. He said that other than food, medicine is also another item that is urgently needed for patients in home isolation. His idea is to have these sets of medicines to hand out to people that think they might be sick or wait for treatment or hospital beds.
เราก็ควรจะมียาชุดแบบนี้ให้เขาไปเลยถ้าเขาเป็นเช่นฟ้าทลายโจรกินกี่วันวันละกี่เม็ดอะไรเราก็จะจัดชุดไปแล้วก็ยาแก้ไอยาละลายเสมหะยาแก้เจ็บคอยาล้างคอแล้วก็อะไรก็แล้วแต่ที่ทำให้เป็นสิ่งที่ยาสามัญประจำบ้านที่เขาควรจะมีระหว่างป่วยครับแล้วก็ถ้าจัดเป็นชุดเราก็จะไปให้เขาเป็นชุดได้เลยนะครับก็จะดีก็ต้องขอบคุณนะครับที่ผู้มีจิตศรัทธาในการ ต่อชีวิตให้คนที่ป่วยเป็นโควิดนะครับซึ่งไม่มีใครที่อยากจะเป็นนะครับมันเลือกไม่ได้นะครับ
Stephanie Adair reporting for Thai PBS World.
And this is indeed a very good initiative from the civil sector when the public health system is being overwhelmed. Actually, Kunat, the disease control department is also sending out the so-called super riders to give basic medical supplies in home isolation in Bangkok. But I think we still definitely need as much help as we could.
Exactly, but it's really nice to see that many people are coming out to help those in need during the pandemic. And these supplies are much needed, especially when many of the communities do not have access to them.
Exactly. And moving on from infections now to vaccination. Thailand got more Sinovac vaccine yesterday, bringing the total doses of the Chinese vaccine delivered to now 24.5 million now. The Chinese embassy in Bangkok said in its Facebook post that another 3 million doses of the Sinovac inactivated virus vaccine have arrived in Bangkok. It also said that China has already delivered 24.5 million doses of Sinovac to Thailand. According to the Thailand's Disease Control Department, 23 million doses of vaccines have been administered in Thailand since the end of February. Out of the 23 million doses here, 11 million doses of Sinovac, 10 million doses of AstraZeneca, and 1.8 million doses of Sinopharm, and 361,000 doses of Pfizer vaccines have been administered to date.
Well, despite the amount of vaccines being administered and imported from overseas, only 7% of the entire population have been fully vaccinated against COVID-19. And this is definitely a big challenge here for the government, considering their plan to fully reopen the country by mid-October.
Right. And so right now, the majority of the vaccine that we have received is Sinovac vaccine. Then we have about 13 million doses of AstraZeneca as of early August, with 5 to 6 million more doses expected later this month, with 4 million more of Sinopharm to be coming soon, with 6 million doses of this Chinese vaccine already delivered. And then, of course, the 1.5 million doses of Pfizer from the U.S. government, with 1 million more expected later.
Right. And now it's time for Empowering Thai Women, where every Monday we will be connecting you to amazing women who are successful and influential in their own ways. In this episode, I interviewed Panipak Wongpathanakit, who recently won a gold medal from the Tokyo Olympics. And of course, her road to success is not an easy one.
ถ้าเป็นความฝันในวัยเด็กคือไม่มีความคิดว่าเราจะเป็นทีมชาติหรือว่าได้เหรียญทองโอลิมปิกได้เลยค่ะเพราะว่าตอนเด็กๆคือรูปร่างบอบบางตัวเล็กผอมแห้งมากๆค่ะแต่พอได้มาเล่นกีฬาได้มาติดทีมชาติค่ะมันเป็นความฝันของหนูแน่นอนค่ะและหนูคิดว่ามันเป็นความฝันของหลายๆคนเลยค่ะที่อยากได้เหรียญทองโอลิมปิกค่ะ
Panipak Wongpathanakit became the pride of her country and an inspiration for countless people after she won Thailand's first gold medal at the 2020 Tokyo Olympics. Her gold medal is only the 10th in Thailand's entire Olympic history, where previous medals were earned either from boxing or weightlifting. Panipak also became the first Thai woman to win a gold medal for Taekwondo.
ตอนแรกที่เตรียมตัวฝึกซ้อมอยู่ค่ะที่เก็บตัวฝึกซ้อมก็รู้สึกเครียดแล้วก็กดดันเพราะว่าเหมือนทุกคนก็มองมาที่เราคนเดียวแต่ว่าพอได้คุยกับทีมงานนักจิตวิทยานายกสมาคมโค้ชอะค่ะก็ไม่มีใครกดดันเลยเขาบอกว่าไม่ได้เหรียญหรือว่าได้เหรียญเราก็อยู่ข้างๆกันเหมือนเดิมคุณไม่ต้องคิดถึงอนาคตว่ามันจะสำเร็จหรือว่าไม่สำเร็จแค่ทำวันนี้ให้ดีที่สุดทำสิ่งที่อยู่ตรงหน้าให้ดีก็พอค่ะ
Despite her nickname Tennis, Panipak's passion for taekwondo began when she was 9 years old. However, her road to success was definitely a rough one. Although she has won a number of gold medals before, Panipak considered quitting the sport when she lost in the quarterfinals at the 2016 Rio Olympics, which she described as the most heartbreaking moment in her life.
ตอนนั้นก็คือเสียใจหนักมากๆค่ะแต่ก็ต้องกลับมาเตะอีก2 รอบเพื่อชิงเหรียญทองแดงกลับบ้านให้ได้พอได้เหรียญทองแดงก็เป็นผลงานที่หลายๆคนมองว่ามันก็คือยิ่งใหญ่แล้วแต่สำหรับตัวหนูคือแบบมันเป็นฝันที่เลวร้ายมากมันเป็นแบบบาดแผลที่ลึกมากๆค่ะหนูคิดว่ามีประสบการณ์เพิ่มมากขึ้นแล้วก็มี mindset ที่โตขึ้นแต่ว่าเมื่อ5 ปีที่แล้วหนูอาจจะไม่ได้ฝึกจิตใจมากพอจิตใจยังไม่เข้มแข็งแข็งแกร่งมากถึงวันนี้ค่ะก็เลยทำให้วันนั้นพลาดไปค่ะ
Apart from the intense training, another challenge for Panipak was when nobody believed that she would ever become an athlete, just because she does not have the typical physique of an athlete. Panipak said she just has to believe in herself and that she can do it, and she has to give it her best.
เขาคิดว่าผู้หญิงตัวเล็กๆแบบนี้เหรอจะเป็นนักกีฬาทีมชาติหรือว่าเป็นนักกีฬาเหรียญทองโอลิมปิกได้คือไม่ว่าเราจะเป็นยังไงไม่รู้ขอแค่เรามั่นใจในตัวเองแล้วก็รู้ตัวเองว่าเราทำได้แล้วก็ทำให้ดีที่สุดค่ะ
As for her next step in life, Panipak has many other dreams she wants to pursue, such as traveling around the world, becoming a YouTuber, and opening up a dog cafe with a sports gym next to it. Most importantly, she wishes to become a coach for other children who aspire to become a martial artist like her.
ก็อยากจะไปสอนน้องๆที่แบบบ้านเด็กกำพร้าหรือว่าน้องๆตามยิมต่างๆเลยค่ะเพราะว่าเราก็เป็นแรงบันดาลใจให้น้องๆเราก็แบบอยากไปส่งพลังบวกแล้วก็รับพลังบวกจากเด็กๆด้วยค่ะเพราะว่าอยู่กับเด็กๆแล้วรู้สึกแบบมีความสุขมากๆค่ะอีกประมาณ5 ปี10 ปีข้างหน้าก็อยากจะให้มีเด็กๆขึ้นมาแล้วก็เก่งๆหนูก็อยากให้น้องๆได้เหรียญทองโอลิมปิกเหมือนหนูกับให้น้องๆขึ้นมายืนในจุดสูงสุดแบบหนูค่ะก็อยากจะส่งต่อแรงบันดาลใจให้กับน้องๆทุกคนแล้วกันค่ะว่าคนตัวเล็กๆหรือว่าตัวใหญ่ๆหรือว่าอะไรก็ตามขอแค่เราเชื่อมั่นในตัวเองแล้วก็ทำมันลงไปกับความฝันที่เราฝันไว้อย่ามัวแต่ฝันเลยค่ะว่าเราอยากเป็นนู่นอยากเป็นนี่เราต้องลงมือทำค่ะแค่ลงมือทำไปก่อนไม่ว่าผลจะเป็นยังไงไม่ต้องกลัวเลยค่ะไม่ต้องคิดถึงอนาคตหรือว่าอดีตแค่อยู่กับปัจจุบันค่ะก่อนอื่นก็อยากขอบคุณทุกคนก่อนนะคะที่เชียร์แล้วก็ติดตามทัพนักกีฬาไทยในการแข่งขันโอลิมปิกครั้งนี้ค่ะอยากจะบอกว่าเสียงเชียร์ของทุกคนเนี่ยถึงโตเกียวเลยค่ะหนูได้รับพลังแล้วก็แรงเชียร์จากทุกคนอย่างน่าแบบว่าตกใจแบบว่าสุดซึ้งใจมากค่ะหนูก็ขอบคุณทุกคนมากๆเลยค่ะ
That is the perfect good vibe for Monday morning, actually.
Right.
And it is not surprising Kun Tennis is among the most popular women in Thailand right now, as of course, what an inspiration she has been.
Exactly, and we have to mention that both Kun Tennis and Kun Teo Sudapor Sisondi are the only Olympic medalists this year and are both women as well. So next week, there will be an interview with Kun Teo next Monday.
Looking forward to it already.
Right.
And with that, we wrap up our first edition of Good Morning with Thai PBS World. Don't forget, though, to follow us on our social media, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and of course, our website, www.thaipbsworld.com.
And don't forget to catch our morning show every weekday at 7:30 a.m. only on Thai PBS. Thanks for watching. Stay safe, and we'll see you tomorrow. สวัสดีค่ะ
สวัสดีค่ะ